my truth is that if I were to look at what the other businesses are doing that are ahead of me, what would I be doing right now and what would I spend my time on? And I'm convinced that this $3 to $12 million revenue type business, or anybody that's aspiring to be that, have to look at the data points and start gathering information to make better and more informed strategic decisions.
Hey, it's the Profit Answer Man, Rocky Lalvani. If you're new to the podcast, check out my interview with Mike Michalowicz. It's episode number 2. If you want to hear about each chapter in the Profit First book, go back and listen to episodes 3 through 13. Episode 1 is the why and how. On the Profit Answer Man, we learn money mastery without all the complicated accounting mumbo-jumbo, using a simple system. Your accountant is busy documenting your transactions and creating a rearview mirror of what happened. My guess is you don't even look at the reports they sent you. If you're like most business owners, you struggle with this, and it's not your fault. We aren't taught money in school, and accountants aren't taught how to be profitable. The Profit First system created by Mike Michalowicz works, and he certified me to help you implement the system in your business. Remember, the new equation is sales minus profit equals expenses. Let's face it, without cash flow, you can't pay your employees, buy needed materials, or pay your mortgage and support your family. I help you to do that and more, so you can focus on the parts of the business you love and receive the rewards for your labor and investment into your business. The stronger you are as a business owner, the more jobs you create, the better we are as a country. Small business owners are the backbone of America, and for that, you deserve to be well rewarded. Just remember, more revenue does not equal more profit. That's why we focus on the bottom line. Every month in 2023, we're going to do a live Q&A call for you listeners to get all of your Profit First questions answered, along with anything you might have heard on the podcast or you want to discuss about your business. They will be on the second Thursday of every month at 1 p.m. Eastern. There is a link in the show notes to register on Eventbrite. Come chat with me live. Today, we're going to chat about the biggest struggles business owners face and how to overcome them. It comes down to getting the wisdom out of your head and into your people so they can take over and you can focus on working on the business. When you do this, you can run your business with a lot less effort and get better results. If you've been listening to the last few episodes, this is a theme. We want you to thrive, which means you're no longer grinding and you make more because that's the way it should be. Malcolm Peace is making Texas feel smaller with fantastic work with small to mid-sized businesses throughout the state. His company, Tsetserra Growth Partners, works with well-established businesses that have owners that are just about to retire but still want their business to thrive. Malcolm and his team help rewrite the operating playbook while maintaining the owner's culture with a strong succession plan. With their experience and focus on operational excellence, they strive to double the company's revenue in just 2 short years. The work is intensive, but he and his team put all the tools in place to give the owner peace of mind that their business will grow from years to come. Let's meet Malcolm and see how he does it. Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Malcolm Peace. It's great to have you join us today.
Oh, Rocky, thank you for having me. Feel honored.
Excited to learn from you. Can you share a little bit about yourself and your business?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm based in Austin, Texas, and I run a company called Tsetserra Growth Partners. We're a holding company of Texas-based businesses. We buy blue-collar industrial type businesses in Texas and hold them for the long term by adding software and standard operating procedures to juice them up a little bit.
Out of curiosity, when you go and you buy these businesses, how many of them have good software and standard operating procedures?
If they have more than a QuickBooks Online, it's a successful day. Let's put it that way. Most are, running on QuickBooks desktop maybe, or online is even great, but I'm preferential on that one, just for the record. But, if they're running more than a QuickBooks software, some sort of accounting software, it's a very successful, surprising scenario that hopefully makes my job a little bit easier. But 9 times out of 10, they are not running anything more than that. And even if they're running that successfully.
And what about standard operating procedures?
Yeah, certainly not. Documenting the knowledge. I call standard operating procedures documenting the knowledge that are in people's heads, or the uncommunicated, communicated standard things that they do in the business. That's just not documented. I think that is a huge miss. And it often, creates a couple different scenarios within the organization. And we can dive into that now or later, but I don't think that is a very often occurring scenario.
So let's start with the software side, and then we'll come to the SOP side, because I think that's a little bit easier. On the software side, what do you usually add on to QuickBooks, or do you change QuickBooks out at all?
I like QuickBooks Online only because it has a lot of API and different integrations that we can do. So we use, on the manufacturing side, for instance, if we're running particularly on inventory and basically the recipes to create things that we manufacture, we can take that inventory and tag it along throughout the process, throughout QuickBooks, and also create purchase orders and things of that nature for our vendors, and creating inventory records and stuff like that. So for us to kind of get the ground running, we have a lot of integrations that can happen, low code, no code software with QuickBooks. So that's why we like to use it. It's not ideal as the business scales, 10, years later or even larger in revenue. But it is for the immediate. And so that's where I try to get us started, just because it's an easier interface for kind of the team to get used to doing on a regular basis if they're not doing it.
If they scale, where do you go then?
It's a great question. We haven't gotten past that point just yet, but we are looking at other things. And that's always the debate, right? We've brought in folks where they're outside or inside and they have suggestions. And so that is a question we will address in the coming future. But right now, we've done such a work to be able to connect all the different pieces of software together. QuickBooks is just the beginning of kind of I would say the back end of the information. And so we've got a lot on the front end. And so at different points, we're going to have to kind of play in and play out what we have from a software perspective. And so it's always a challenge, but that's one that we haven't replaced just yet. And, open to recommendations in the future always, but that's just kind of where we're at right now.
And honestly, I think most small businesses up to 10 to 20 million all pretty much run QuickBooks Online, because it gives them access wherever they are. And like you said, there's so many integrations with so many other companies that it makes it easy to do what you need to do. How timely is your QuickBooks? What I mean by that is everything being done real time, or is it more, it gets done a couple weeks later?
No, we categorize both on the AP and AR and also transactions daily. So that's actually an important thing for me. I want to be able to check in on a regular basis. We reconcile weekly. And so we've got a team that does that. It was initially when I took over the company, QuickBooks was done by our office manager. She's really, really great on this particular company we took over in October. It was done that way. It's not a long-term solution. So we're building out more of a shared services model where we have that process done and there's actual connections from a holdco side of things to the portfolio company. That just wasn't the way it was structured originally when we bought this company. It was all internal. So it just takes time for us to kind of help gravitate that out. But that's our standard, is that daily, those things are being checked in so I can always know AR and AP. And then at the same while, at the end of the week, we fully reconcile. So if we needed to do anything particular with that, we could.
So if you walk in and you take over a company, how long does it take you to, assuming they have reasonable QuickBooks to start with, to roll in all of your changes and implement all of that just on the software side?
Yeah, we've got a 100-day plan that we have some milestones along the way in that. And so we hold pretty fast to that. That was a recommendation I had from somebody else years ago starting out, is have this 100-day plan. People understand it. They can consume it. So I've tweaked that along the way, but that is certainly a part of our 100-day plan and a big portion of it. The thing that's unique to us, and when you buy a company, there's two different ways to buy a company. You can buy it as an asset purchase, where it's a whole new entity. You buy the assets of the company, all the things you can see and the things you can't see, the name and the legacy, marketing and aspects like that, and website, but also the hard materials and things like that. When we do that, we have to start a whole new chart of accounts and kind of start a new process because it is a new entity. If we are buying it as a stock purchase, we take over that QuickBooks and we try to mold it over time. It depends on the time of the year. For us too, I like kind of closing out the end of the year before we change a bunch of chart of accounts, and then we can kind of reevaluate after that. So depending on the time of the year, that's the process that we do. But it can take, call it 90 to 100 days for us to get it right, and we're in a decent flow. And what I consider a flow is just the role that I sit in right now is that I can get a report at the end of it that's cohesive, concise. I can answer it, and I can be the questions can be answered. I can understand it is incredibly important. And so we have, again, standard of weekly and monthly reports that come from the financials and sales related questions and so on and so forth.
And it's designed for you to understand what's happening in the business. And I think that is a big aha. Most business owners don't realize you can standardize this for you, not for your accountant, not for your bookkeeper, not for anybody else. Make it so it makes sense to you so that it's easy for you to see within your business, thumbs up, thumbs down. Did it work? Is it not working? Is there something I should be concerned about and look at? And that's a big part of it. And so I think that is awesome. And so as you're listening to this, think for yourself, hey, as we roll up and we close out 2023, do we want to take a 100-day sprint at the beginning of 2024 and make this a reality? Because it's possible, but you got to plan for it, right? Take the time, plan out your 100-day sprint. You can do amazing things in a quarter if you are focused. Anything else on that before we shift gears?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that it's a big change for the company being taken over, for everybody to understand. And this is where I sit, and leading into any kind of SOP stuff is I want to know the information from a data point perspective. I don't know where that comes from. Somewhere along the lines, I got obsessed about it. I want to know if I can get asked this question from somebody else, I need to be able to ask it with a valid data point. I probably should have gone to law school or something at some point just because I like facts and being able to understand how things are. But that's what it came down to. And full transparency, we raise capital on a deal by deal basis. And so I've got investors in these deals and I get random calls. I'll get a call from somebody and say, hey, just checking in. I want to know how my money's doing well. I want to know that you're doing well. I want to know if you need any support. A lot of our investors, if not 95% of them, are current or former business owners. And so they understand what it's like. They understand it can be lonely. They understand that it can be a challenge. And so they also want to know that information too, because they want to be able to make informed advice. They want to be able to speak into, hey, I noticed the last 2 months, your quoting number, how many quotes you've got out in a month, or how many success rates you've gotten, close rates and all this kind of stuff is going down, or it's trending up, or it's staying flat. And you know that there's seasonality. Why haven't you all picked it up? Like, these things are things that are important. And I think there's validity to be able to answer those questions when you have the fiduciary responsibility of taking care of somebody else's money. And so that's what we do. And so I like to have data points to be able to speak it to the parties that get asked.
You're speaking my language. And I love the fact that you have the data points. How many leads came in? How many of those leads did we talk to? How many of them converted? What was the average sale? Because then you can start to predict the math equation of your business. And what's really cool is, if I look and say, well, I got 10 leads and I got one client, the biggest question I'm going to ask is, rather than getting 10 more leads, how do we go from 1 to 2? Because if we can just tweak our sales process, we don't have to work any harder, and we just doubled our business. And that's what I love is figuring out that puzzle.
Yeah, we look at businesses that are doing $3 to $12 million in revenue. That's kind of our sweet spot. And not to get too much into minutia, I think that's where we can add value. I really think this is like everything we're talking about is a value add that just doesn't occur in most circumstances in these small businesses. And it's not a knock on this business owner. The business owner that took a business from $0 to $3 million or $1 million for that matter are impressive people that have skills I just don't have. And so I got to give them all the credit in the world. It's a challenge to be able to get to that point. And I think it takes a different skill set to make that next move that you have to either self-educate on, get other people around you, bring in new team members, all these types of things that you can make that move. But it's a different kind of skill set that you have to learn, grow, and develop. And in that, I know where I play well. And so in that case, if I'm in the $3 to $12 million in revenue style of businesses, and I'm looking at it and saying, okay, there are people ahead of me that are doing double our revenue. There are people that are paying triple or quadruple and so on and so forth. What would they be doing right now? And it's not sheer luck that they've gotten to where they are. And this is where we can get to standard opportunities at some point, but they are doing the same kind of boring, repetitive thing with intention to detail like crazy. I can't even explain to you. I got an email from my office manager a second ago. We're running some analysis on something for our pricing to get a new quote today out. And she said to me, you wouldn't believe it. We have 4 different pricing numbers on what the cost of this material is in 4 different Google documents. We didn't have Google documents even in place when I took over this business. They were all running off of different versions of things. So we finally got to a point where people are off on the same version, but on different tabs, we're at different price points. So that's not to bring in my dirty laundry for the audience. But my truth is that if I were to look at what the other businesses are doing that are ahead of me, what would I be doing right now? And what would I spend my time on? And I'm convinced that this $3 to $12 million revenue type business or anybody that's aspiring to be that have to look at the data points and start gathering information to make better and more informed strategic decisions.
And that's a big part of what we help our clients do, especially, and I see those types of spreadsheets much more on the construction side. But when you can start putting in all of your products and the cost of your product, and every time you get an invoice, have it automatically update it to the latest cost, then when you go to do the next bid, you're constantly at market, and not what happened during COVID where everyone got way behind the curve and got burned. You're staying up to date. You know that you're bidding out appropriately. You know that you have real costs, and you've got systems and processes in place to update the prices. This sounds like a lot of work. It is to build it. It's easy to maintain it. You just have to do the work to build out a system for you. And we've had a lot of guests on who know how to do this for you for not a lot of money, and get it done, because it will massively change your profit margins, and it will massively change the understanding of what's going on in your business.
Completely agree.
So let's talk about standing operating procedures, because the number one problem I see in all small businesses is the business owner has all the knowledge in their head, and none of them can get it out of their head and into their people.
Yeah. Ooh, touchy subject.
Why is it touchy?
Because I think that what I like to call, and everything you said I agree with, I think what I like to call them is centralized businesses. It's centered around the person out of necessity at the beginning. It was centered around. And I mean that. What someone does to get over that first $1 million in revenue is truly a feat. I mean, it's impressive. They should be commended. They should get a medal. I mean, it's impressive. It's hard. It's incredibly hard. And a lot of it had to run on their back. And all of it had to fall on them to be able to pull it all together. They hire some hands. Those hands fall away. They can't pay a market because they don't have so much margin, and all these types of things to kind of figure it all out along the way. But eventually, that person needs to not be in the middle. And I think most time or not, whatever, they're in the middle because that's just what feels comfortable to them. And until they can take that information and decentralize it and create a structure where there's responsibilities, and this is the one that I'm always constantly trying to learn, understanding of what other people are measured by, then that information can be handed off. For example, if you hand off a standard operating procedure or something that should just happen automatically in the business to make the business run effectively to somebody else, and they fall short of that. What's your measure? Is it always a subjective situation? Is it always an instance where they have to wonder if they did wrong or right, or they did not? Like that's the part where standard operating procedures become really, I think, supercharged, is that you can take this is a process that we do, here's how it's done, and this is how we measure it was successful. And I think the latter, if that's your motivation, I think the other becomes second nature, and it's a desire internally to do.
I just find for a lot where the struggle really comes up, and the truth of it is, I need to deliver today, and I don't have time to build that system. And that's the biggest problem, I think. They're caught in this catch-22, because if you didn't start from the beginning and build it this way, you become overwhelmed. And then it's like, how do I create balance in these two? And balance is almost impossible. There's two underlying things there that I thought of as you were talking. The first is we have to make sure we have the right people in the right seat with the right capability. And I see more often than not, we put people there because we like them, because we want to give them a chance, because it's the best we have at the moment. And it's all human nature. And then the second part of that is giving people agency and letting them know, hey, you're in charge, take ownership. It's okay if you make small failures, right? We're not going to scream at you for that, but also having a hard and fast on how they're measured. And just because you fail a measurement is not a reason to whip somebody. It's a question of, okay, what can we do to support you? Because we want you to hit this goal. And again, those are all mindset shifts.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the point you just made there is so critical. And this is a conversation that it's probably a broken record in some ways, but it's something that changes, because I just think it's counter to what happens in most business, where you say, here's the measure of success. And the default, if that measure is not met, the default is I failed. That's what a lot of employees feel. A lot of partners in business think, if I don't meet this measure, I failed, or so on and so forth. And I like to ask a different question. I always ask, was it a misunderstanding who the person is and what they're capable of doing with that role and that responsibility? Is it a misalignment with a customer or an external aspect, meaning that we told a customer that this is what we're going to be able to do, but it's just unrealistic? And vice versa, the latter, is it a possibility that we just need to change our expectations in general? And I think all of those things, and there's probably other scenarios and questions to ask, but in all of those situations, it reverts back to, man, this is not a moment to beat up. It's a moment to think back and also make a different decision potentially in the future. And I think that that's the key part when you look at standard operating procedures is, here's what we're striving for. But standard operating procedures are never, in my opinion, they never become concrete. They're kind of like liquid all the time. And they need to be adjusted slightly. They need to be tweaked. They need to be improved. And there needs to be the flexibility of who's accountable to making sure that that process is always being addressed and never being dropped off and saying, oh, well, we always did it that way, and that's our standard, and we've documented it, and so on and so forth. But hey, we could tweak here. Like this could be slightly improved here. Oh, wait, we didn't know that information. Let's tweak here. Let's make sure we don't miss that in the future. And I don't think you start doing that into our first question about metrics and managing data. I don't think you start doing that evaluation until you start putting that stuff in place.
And I think the biggest thing, so it's about building culture. And the biggest thing with building culture is building a culture that's just the way we do it, does not exist in the cultural world of how people speak. Because the reality of the situation is, how you did it was great yesterday. Tomorrow's different. And if you're not constantly evolving, changing, improving, then you're going to get left behind, because somebody else is changing the paradigm. So it is a constant growth, and you've got to figure out how to do that. How do you come in and change the culture of an organization?
So our 100-day sprint is a great question. And our 100-day sprint that we do, first 100 days, is we tend to be in information gathering mode. So we try to gather as much information as humanly possible. So it's a matter of not just like, what's our sales for last quarter or what's this, that, and the other. It's why do we do that again? Okay, so let's write that down. Let me write that down in the notes for a second. We do that because someone else discovered the following thing. And in some cases, optimally, it's with the previous business owner and they can speak to that. And they can say, we did that for the following reason. And then we start saying, okay, is that an impediment? Is that holding us back from going forward? Is that also critical for us keeping status quo? What is going on with that piece? And then we can start saying in rank order, which are the things that we need to address first? And it starts creating a culture of let's start gathering what's going on in the house. And let's start understanding what's occurring in the house. Because you can go sit down and someone will say, well, we got this problem, we've got this problem, we've got this problem. And I'm like, great. But hold on a second. That doesn't revenue generate in any way. This is a personnel thing. And that person, may or may not be critical to the enterprise. And so on and so forth. And I say that kind of flippantly, but I mean it. Like there's certain roles when you come in that if you just don't stabilize and get kind of solid, the whole ship will fall apart. So there's things that I have to kind of pick and choose on what we focus on at the beginning. And what ends up happening in the gathering of the information phase is I can understand where are the stress points for each person's role. Because what will happen is each person sitting in a different seat on the bus, depending on their capabilities, how comfortable they're in the seat, how previously well they were resourced, so on and so forth. They'll start communicating, hey, boss, we got an issue here. Hey, we got this issue over here. We've got another issue over here. And I can start figuring out in rank order which are the ones that we have to prioritize to stabilize the ship. And then we start creating more standard operating procedures after the fact.
What do you usually find are the most important roles in a company?
Ooh, good question. I'm biased, right? Everybody's got their biases. I think the most important role personally is first, it's going to sales. I think, again, this is just speaking to my clientele. I can't even tell you how many times I go into a conversation with a business owner and I say, crystal ball, what would it look like if you were still holding on to this business for the next 5-10 years? What would you focus on? And like more often than not, they're saying sales. I wish we had different customers. I wish we had a diversified group of people that we service. I think we, could do this. We could open up this branch. We could do all these types of things. So I think sales and getting them the right information to go make informed decisions along the way on the sales side is incredibly important. And figuring out how critical was the business owner to the sales process. I think as you grow in a small business, and again, I have run small little businesses. Challenge from 1 to 1 million is incredible. The goal there, in my opinion, is to get closer and closer to revenue generating activities. That's just my philosophy. If you spend time in the back office, you spend time on operations, you spend time on all these types of things, I think you're holding the business back. I think you can create better possibilities if you get closer and closer to revenue. So when I get a business that has an owner that's in the middle and they're spending a lot of time on revenue generating things, I look at it, how do I stabilize that? How many buddies are they the ones selling to? How often are they interacting with these customers? And then I can get a gauge on kind of what's our next step forward.
And I think, all of this really comes down to you're working on the business instead of in the business. You're thinking through all of these different things and figuring out what works best. And then you go on sprints. And I love quarterly sprints. And, they follow. I love the book 12-Week Year. It's based on the same principles as Profit First, Parkinson's Law. You can get a lot more done than you think you can if you're organized, focused, and intentional. And literally, that's what it comes down to with business. Now, I know you guys don't use Profit First, but we chatted a little. You do use some sort of money management system to keep your cash in the appropriate place. Can you share a little about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have an operating account. Previously, when I take over a business, it's like one account, maybe a savings. So we have dedicated accounts. We have an operating account. I think that people in our business is one of the most critical aspects. I don't want to lose any people in the space that we play at. We want to make sure that paycheck always cashes, right? So we have reserves set up, multiple months of reserves set up in the account for payroll. That includes taxes, that includes the actual payroll themselves. We have that all forecasted out. And then we have a kind of a operating savings account that we use for expenditures, larger, smaller, that come out of that. And so that's operating kind of day to day, working with our vendors, so on and so forth, comes out of that. And then next would be all our payroll that has multiple months of reserves, because I never want to lose somebody because our check won't cash. And at the same time, we have kind of a reserve account that we use for greater CapEx expenditures or other related aspects.
And so I know for a lot of small businesses, the question they ask me is, how much reserve cash should I leave in the business?
Yeah, that's a great question. Everybody's scenario is different from a working capital perspective. So I always want to be conscientious of that. What we've done, and this is going back to what I think is critical for our businesses that we look at, is we do have, costs, COGS that happen in the business. I want to know that we are never overextending a line for that. So we play ourselves as the bank. We don't utilize a monthly credit line because sometimes it takes us a while to get paid. And so we don't want to do a credit line and kind of play with the bank. We play with ourselves in the sense that we use our own money as the banking for all of our COGS. And so that's what we do. And so we know kind of how many months that we have actual money going out the door for that related stuff. And so we build up reserves, about three tranches of those payments can easily come out, as well as we know we can just do our regular operating. So we're banking for ourselves, and we're also just managing kind of fixed costs that we have inside the business for 3 months as well.
And it's always nice to have a ton of extra cash so that you don't have to worry. You get to sleep at night. Sure. Life is good.
Yeah. Well, to that point, and I'm just going to hit it home, I'm totally biased. I think the scenario that happens with that is a situation where a business owner is possibly, not always the case, but possibly spending time on non-revenue generating activities. And if they can get closer to revenue generating activities, they can spend the time. And if that's in their sweet spot, and they can, know what they're doing. And usually when you get to a point, you do know what you're doing as far as to close a sale. Let's get you closer to that so that that's where you can actually feel a little more comfortable. So the game is on your back, or a team of people that you can create. They can be utilized in order to generate some more free cash flow in the business.
I love it. Before we go, what brings you here? What do you want out of all of this?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. One of our biggest challenges in these small businesses is finding people that can run them successfully and can add that value. So we're looking for key people that want to be in Texas, because we're focused on Texas-based businesses that can roll up their sleeves and get involved with us. So we're looking to bring in operators, people that want to be a part of something, have an autonomy within these operating companies, and run them full time, that can have kind of that leadership role and that opportunity, and know that they have someone backing them and have a group of people backing them, giving them all the necessary things that they need to be successful along the way.
It's a lot easier than doing it all yourself.
I completely agree. So we're always looking for those folks. Sometimes people come from outside the state. Some people are in the state, but we're always looking for folks that want to run these businesses, blue collar, love kind of that background, and can just roll up their sleeves. And so if you ever want to learn a little bit more about that, you can reach us at info@tsetserra.com. That's spelled TSETSERRA.com. Or just look at our website, Tsetserra Growth Partners. Happy to chat a little bit more about that. That's something we're always wanting to have conversations around, is people that we can bring into the fold that believe in what we're doing, buying businesses, holding on to them long term, and continue to preserve and increase the legacy that these business owners have built.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Cool. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Are you ready for a 100-day sprint? Let's get your numbers in order. Let's be able to predict your future revenue. Let's have a better understanding of how it's all going without having to dig and hope, but with clear dashboards that show you what's going on. That's what this is all about. Give your people agency and then support them to take over so you don't have to. Are you ready? Because, it's time. Let's face it. You don't need more resources. You need to be more resourceful, have more systems, processes, and dashboards so that you can just focus on the bottom line.
If you'd like for us to be a part of your profitability journey, we have different programs available ranging from do-it-yourself to one-on-one coaching. Our course, The Profit Blueprint, teaches you everything you need to know to transform your profitability. There are 3 different tiers ranging from DIY to done with you so that businesses of all sizes can get the support that's best. Join the waitlist in the show notes to get more information and be a part of the next cohort. If you want a done-for-you service, you can hire us as your Chief Profitability Officers. We only work with a handful of clients, so they all get our full attention. We work with business owners who have or are growing to $500,000 to $10 million in revenue. You can use the scheduling link in the show notes to get on our calendar for a good fit conversation to see if we're the right people to support you and how we can help you.
This episode of the Profit Answer Man podcast is brought to you by SMBpodcastnetwork.com. The network is a collection of podcasts and shows from around the internet which focus on bringing you interviews with amazing guests who share actionable advice, ideas, and information for small and medium-sized business owners and entrepreneurs. Visit www.smbpodcastnetwork.com to find more great shows and easily subscribe to be notified of new episodes. It's a great way to discover quality content. If you've discovered us via the network, then I hope you enjoy today's show and will consider subscribing directly so you never miss our episodes. Remember to check out my other podcast, Richer Soul, where we talk about how to live the ultimate life and be the best business owner you can be. As we close out, let's repeat the mantra. Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. Have an abundant and profitable week.